We are in Parashat Metzora. Usually Parashat Tazria and Metzora are read together, but this year, like many others, we only read the Parasha of Metzora, which both Tazria and Metzora are kind of talking about the same thing. And besides talking about all the legions of tzarat, but the idea, the topic, the concept of these two parashot are lashon hara and everything that we do with our mouth, gossiping and so forth. So before we start, I just want to share with you a quick story. That once there was a Rosh Yeshiva, a very, very big yeshiva, that one day he comes to his students and he tells them, stop everything that you're doing. I'm going to do now a siyum, a completion of the Talmud, of the Gemara, and I want you all to join me. Okay, so he didn't quite understand. What's the big deal? You did that already many times, that you did a siyum, a completion of the entire Gemara. Why now, in the middle of the day, without any announcement, suddenly you're calling us all? So he says, this is a very special siyum for me. And I'll tell you why. That many years ago, I understood that we're wasting so much time between things, those little moments that you don't really do anything and it's just wasted time. I decided to learn in those 3 minutes, every time that I have a few minutes. So I have a little Gemara in my pocket, and every time waiting for the bus, standing in the banking line, waiting for my wife to be ready when we're going out, whatever it is, here 3 minutes, here 2 minutes, here 4 minutes, I would pull out the Gemara, read a little bit. Today I'm doing a siyum, and this is a very special siyum because this is not like when I sit down and learn in an organized way. It's here grabbing a minute and here grabbing a minute. And he was basically saying, just focus how many times, how many minutes a day you're wasting your time. You're just sitting. And looking back at it, I'm saying, well, I could have done now 5 minutes. I could have read something. I could have done something. Now, some people don't really care about it, but a person that values their time understands, wait a minute, these little moments, they make a huge difference. Unfortunately, most people don't really value their time. Worse than that, people don't value other people's time. But when a person really wants to take care of every little moment, then you have to fill in the gaps. And I spoke with somebody not too long ago, and I told him, listen, the same way that in business you have time management, your whole life has to be with time management. Most people really waste most of their time. And this specific Rosh Yeshiva decided to take the free moments and to utilize it for something good. With that said, that in itself is a message. We can make this a standalone class. Just, value every moment that you have. I always, doesn't matter where I go, there's always something in my pocket that I can pull out and read, something that I can complete. And with that said, our sages, when they try to conclude the Torah, conclude halachot, teach halachot, they couldn't really pinpoint time wasting as a sin, but nevertheless, our sages never liked any type of wasting time. They couldn't categorize it as a sin or as something against the Torah. I can't really find a source for wasting time. But nevertheless, they didn't like it. They didn't like the wasting of the time, to a point that they said it's like a sin. It's not really a sin. You cannot find a real good source, but it says it's like a sin. Now, most of the time, the waste of the time that I'm talking about is not necessarily when you're standing in the banking line. That's also kind of a waste of time. You can do something in the meantime, or you're sitting in traffic or whatever it is. But our sages say the main waste of time is when we just chit-chat with no purpose. There's not lashon hara, not saying lashon hara here. Lashon hara, that's a sin. You're just saying pitputim. Just saying, hey, how are you? I'm okay. How was this? How was that? Saying that is really the problem with wasting of time. With that said, the Gemara quotes a verse from the book of Amos, and it's a famous verse that it says, Magid le'adam ma sacho. This is in the book of Amos, chapter 4, verse 13. The translation is, and declares to man what is his speech. The Talmud takes this verse, and it says, when a person will die, of course, we learned about it many times, that when we die, we go up to the heavens, and the first thing we meet is we have a court case. You can call it Judgment Day, you can call it however you want, but we're all going to be judged. The Talmud says on this verse in the book of Amos, that when we go up to the heavens, to Shamayim, they're going to show us, each and every one of us, in the heavenly court, all these pitputim, all these chat that has no point to it, and like a movie of all the times that you were just talking with no importance. And needless to say, I mean, like I said, it's not really a sin. You can't categorize it as a sin, but they're still going to show you all the small talk and all the chit-chat that has no purpose, and nothing positive comes out of it, and not necessarily it has to have something negative come out of it. But nevertheless, that in itself is going to be extremely embarrassing to the person. Just imagine they're showing you a movie of nonsense, like real nonsense. On that, the Baal Tanya brings in the book of Tanya, he sources it from the Zohar, and that's very extreme to the Tanya, because the Tanya, the approach of the Tanya and the Baal Tanya is not like a harsh approach of the Zohar. It's a more optimistic, a more positive approach. But in the Tanya, the Baal Tanya says, and he quotes from the Zohar, that when a person will die, these chit-chat, in Hebrew it's called Burim betelim, that you talk, and batel means has no importance. There's nothing, no substantial meaning to it. So the Zohar says that these types of chit-chat, it impures the nefesh, impures your soul to a point that a person will have to be taken to Kaphakah to be cleansed. And Kaphakah, that's a severe punishment to the soul. It's not Gehenom. This is Kaphakah, it's a whole different department. The Baal Tanya says that the impurity that falls and that gets attached to the soul because of this chit-chat, then one will have to go through Kaphakah to have this impurity removed. And this is pretty severe. I don't want to go to Kaphakah. Go read in the sources what Kaphakah means. Kaphakah, the translation is a slingshot. That they take the neshama and they throw it across the universe from one side to the other, showing the neshama what it could have done, what it did do, there's all sorts of definitions and explanations. That's, to many of our sources, Kaphakah is worse than Gehenom. Because Gehenom, before a neshama goes into Gehenom, there's a defined time. Whatever it is. In Kaphakah, there's no definition. Whenever they decide, they take the soul out. So with that said, in this week's parasha, and it's also applicable to last week's parasha, because usually they go together, but the main theme of what the parasha is focusing on is the power of speech. And to a point that the wisest man of all, of course, is King Solomon, Melech Shlomo, he says, Mavet v'chaim beyad halashon. The death and life are in the hand of the tongue. Saying, in other words, that one word can chas v'shalom destroy the entire world, and on the other hand, one word can do positive things, that you can take a person, chas v'shalom, that has a great career, one wrong word, the whole career goes down. And it can be the other way around. You say one word, one right word, and it can boost your career, your ratings, or your popularity, whatever it is. On that comes the Hasidic philosophy and approach and says, don't call it that the mavet v'chaim beyad halashon, that the death and life is in the hand of the tongue. Rather, say the quality of life is in the hands of the tongue. I never found, up until now, a good explanation why it says beyad halashon, in the hand of the tongue. But nevertheless, that's maybe one day Hashem will open my eyes and reveal to me the source that explains why Shlomo HaMelech says mavet v'chaim, death and life, beyad halashon, in the hand of the tongue. The tongue doesn't have a hand. I mean, what I understand from that that the hand represents that you have an option, that it's not mandatory. You can choose what to say, what not to say. But nevertheless, that's just my way of looking. But I didn't find any good commentary why King Solomon says beyad halashon, in the hand of the tongue. But nevertheless, if we're taking a different approach, then the Hasidic philosophy says, don't look at it as life and death, rather look at the quality of life. How you talk will affect your quality of life in many different aspects, whether in the physical level, in the spiritual level, and so forth. Now, when we're looking at this parasha, it's focusing on what happens if a person wakes up in the morning and what do you know? A stain on the wall. Now, in our generation, that would look like molds, maybe some water came in or something. But in the Torah, it says a person wakes up in the morning and he sees a stain on the wall. Doesn't know what it is. So he has to call the Kohen. Now the Kohen looks at it. The Kohen is professional in evaluating the situation. And if the Kohen thinks or decides or sees, based on his knowledge, that this might be tzarat, leprosy, then he says, listen, you got to vacate the house. You're going to have a problem here. Of course, the Kohen represents the side of chesed, so he first of all tells him, remove everything from the house before I declare that the house is impure. Because if chas v'shalom the Kohen will declare the house is impure, everything in it is impure too. Which means that you have to kasher all the utensils, throw certain things. So the Kohen says, first of all, remove everything from the house. All your utensils, all your plates and cups and everything and your clothes, remove everything. But then the Kohen declares, this is a house that is inflicted with lesion, with tzarat. And they, and they didn't do it, of course. That's my stupid humor, that they would take a yellow, how do you call it? The police, the tape, how? Yeah, like a police tape around the house. Don't come close. The house is, inflicted with tzarat. Of course, I'm saying it in a humorous way, but the reality is that the Kohen will recognize tzarat right away. That's it. The Torah says, "Hisgiret habayit." He shuts up the house, shuts down the house. Everybody has to move out. And then the Torah continues in saying, if this doesn't pass, and the Kohen comes again after a week, after 2 weeks, if the stain was not removed after 2 weeks, first of all, he removes the people from the house for a week. Then they come back, they inspect. If it didn't pass, they're waiting another week. After 2 weeks, if it didn't pass, then they have to break the bricks. Wherever the tzarat is, they have to break it out. Completely demolish it and put new stones. If you remember, 2 years ago, when the Corona started, then it really started around the Parashot of Metzora, and at the time they put us in the first lockdown was 7 days, then another lockdown for 7 days. At the time I said it's the same idea, that the Kohen first locks down the house for 7 days and then another days. I gave a whole lecture about it, because then I was explaining, listen, all these issues are coming because our Lashon Hara. Nevertheless, the Torah explains that if the lesion doesn't get removed from the walls, then they have to break the bricks there, and if that doesn't help, eventually they have to break the whole house down. And then the next level, first it gets attached to the house. Next level, if it doesn't help, then it will come on the clothes. And the person wakes up in the morning, whoop, what do you know? A stain. I don't remember eating that. Okay, and the Torah gives all the explanations. It can be a red stain, a green stain. Same thing, calls the Kohen, tells him, listen, I have a weird stain on my garment. The Kohen would look, if it's tzarat, again, leprosy, then the same thing. They have to remove everything. And at the end, if after 14 days it doesn't pass, then they have to burn the clothes. Worse than all of that, if that continues, then the tzarat can be found on the person itself. It will actually affect the person itself, and needless to say that then already the person has to go out of the camp, announcing, Ani Metzora, Metzora, Metzora. He has to scream, I have leprosy on me, don't come close to me. Very embarrassing situation. Besides the fact that the Torah calls it a very severe disease. There's different commentaries. The Gaon from Vilna says that's based on the teachings of the Zohar. Then in our generation, the reason why we don't have tzarat, because then everybody will have tzarat. We will all be affected by it with how we talk. The Zohar says that the tzarat in our generation is on our nefesh. It's internal, which will affect the people, a person, with it can be anger, can be with depression, sadness, anxiety, fears, all sorts of different disorders that's affecting the nefesh. But nevertheless, the Torah defines it as a very severe disease. It's not some, rash. And now, of course, comes the big question: what is the sin? What's such a severe sin that all this, that the person has to go through it to a point that if it doesn't stop, it goes on the body? And of course, we spoke about it not once and not twice. Tzarat, leprosy, comes because of Lashon Hara. That's what our sages explain. Although the Talmud, when it goes more in length, and I explained that in that long video that I told you, that it says that the tzarat, the lesion, comes because 7 sins, gasut ruach, being rude and lying, and I gave a whole lecture of that, if you remember, 2 years ago, explaining all the 7 reasons why one will get the tzarat. But nevertheless, we all know that the tzarat comes on Lashon Hara. Now, where does our sages bring it from? So I know many people, when you ask them, where do you remember in the Torah that somebody got punished because of Lashon Hara? Most people raise their hand with Miriam, right? Where she spoke Lashon Hara about Moshe Rabbeinu and she got leprosy, and the whole camp had to wait for her for 7 days. But there's another situation, another story prior to that with Lashon Hara, with Moshe Rabbeinu, And what really happened there? To tell you briefly what was going on, I'm sure you remember the story, just to refresh your mind. Moshe Rabbeinu is retired. He has a house on the mountain. He has a few goats. One day he goes out for a walk, and whoop, Hashem appears to him and tells him, I want you to go down to Mitzrayim and take my nation out. And for the whole week there's negotiation. Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to remove responsibility, and Moshe Rabbeinu presents 5 arguments why he can't do it. The first thing he says, Paro will laugh at me. I will come to Paro and tell him, release all your slaves, and he's going to laugh at me. Argument number 2, he says, listen, I'm not fit to this. I stutter, I'm not a spokesman, I'm not a diplomat, I'm not a politician. I'm not the man for you. Argument number 3 says, I have an older brother. What do you want from me? There's an older brother. He's already in Mitzrayim. Doesn't need a visa. He's already there. Don't need to deal with immigration right now. Take him. Argument number 4, he says, listen, they're going to ask me God's name. I don't know God's name. Because if you remember, Yosef left signs that when a man will come and say certain codes, you'll know that he's the Redeemer. So he says, listen, they're going to ask me what's God's name. I don't know God's name. And then he comes to the last argument number 5, by saying, you know what? They're not going to believe me. Hashem says, who's not going to believe you? He says, the nation. They're not going to believe me. Why would they believe me? After 210 years of slavery, why would they believe me? At this point, then Hashem got upset. Because all the arguments in the beginning, when he says, Paro will laugh at me, Hashem says, don't worry, I'll make sure that he doesn't laugh at you. He says, I stutter, Hashem says, don't worry, I'll give you a spokesman. When he says, I have an older brother, Hashem says, don't worry, your older brother will go with you. When he says, I don't know Hashem's name, Hashem says, I'll tell you my name. What's the big deal? But when he said, they're not going to believe me, then Hashem says, you know what, I had it up to here. And then you know the story. He told him, put your hand in your jacket, in your clothes, and he takes the hand out full of leprosy, and he tells him, don't talk Lashon Hara about my nation. Don't decide for them if they're going to believe to you or not. Don't talk about them. So we see then, right from the beginning, with their relationship with Moshe Rabbeinu, there's already also Lashon Hara. And needless to say, that also Moshe Rabbeinu got punished by talking Lashon Hara. Now comes another question. Why is Lashon Hara so bad? And really, when you're thinking about it. I mean, some cases, when you slander, when you really hurt somebody. But you know, Lashon Hara, We learned that many times. Lashon hara is when I'm telling you the truth about somebody, whether there's a benefit or not. So why is it so bad? And you know what? Okay, I understand. It's bad. Hey, murder, I think, is worse. Committing adultery and many other things. Why is that so bad? To a point that our sages even say that there are 3 sins that we cannot be saved from every day. Every day we sin. That, and one of them is lashon hara. Unless you go live on a mountain or you don't talk. So the Talmud says the reason why lashon hara is so bad, because lashon hara is like an arrow. Once you shoot it, you don't know where it's going to go. It can go 100 meters, 200 meters, 500 meters. It can hit, it can miss. But once it's left, that's it. It's not in your hands. You have no control over it. So, on that said, I'm sure you heard the story, and I was looking many, many times to the source of it. Of course, I'm sure it's just a parable, just a story to teach us. But there's a fairy tale, we'll call it right now, a fairy tale or a Agada, that there was one person, and he lived in some town, and he was the gossiper of the town. All day long, you wanted to know something about anybody, you go to him. And all day long, he would gossip about the whole world. And one time came Rosh Hashanah, he decided to do tshuva. He goes to the rabbi and tells him, listen, I need to do tshuva, and I have a terrible sin, and I don't know what to do. So the rabbi tells him, okay, what's the sin? He says, I gossip. I gossip all the time. What can you give me so I can repent and do some type of a rectification? So he tells him, go home and take a pillow, and open the pillow, and then let all the feathers out. And come back. Okay, he comes back, tells him, okay, I did it. I let all the feathers out. So he says, okay, now go home and collect back all the feathers and put it back in the pillow. He says, I can't do that. And they're all over the place. You know, the wind already took it. I can't find all the feathers. So he says, exactly. That's the problem with lashon hara. Once you let it out, how are you going to get it all back in? You don't know. You'll get half of it in. You'll get 3/4. You'll be able to somehow control some of it, but you don't know, it's all over the place. And that's really the severity of lashon hara. With that said, there's a famous story in the Talmud that it's talking about a certain individual, a king, that his name was Hordus. It was the time of the end of the era of the Second Temple. And he was, there's a big question if he was even Jewish. If he converted, he says, Ish Edomi. He's from the land of Edom. He was some say he was a ger, he converted. Some sources says he wasn't even Jewish. But nevertheless, he wanted to become king. And he had all the political power, he had all the money, all the sponsors, everything. And somehow he took over the kingdom. And one day, lo and behold, he becomes king. I'm talking about king of Israel, not king of Persia. And he knew that the day he's going to become king, he's going to have a problem with some enemies. He knew he's going to have enemies. And who, of course, is his enemies? The Chachmei Israel, the sages of Israel, of all the Jews. Now, why would they become his enemies? Because they're going to go and fight with him by saying, we can't appoint you as a king, even if you are a convert. Let's say you are. We can't appoint a king on Israel with a convert. You have to be a born Jewish individual. Like in America, you can't become a president if you immigrated. You have to be born in America. Or Kenya? Ah, yeah. You jumped the gun. I was about to say something else, but yeah. But same thing here. Same thing here. The sages would go and fight with him by telling him, how did you become king? What, did you rig the elections? Like some other individuals we know. How did you become king? And even if you are a real convert, but we can't appoint a king over us who's not born Jewish. Besides, like I told you, many sources say he wasn't even Jewish. But nevertheless, that's not the point. The point is that he knew he's going to have a problem with the Chachmei Israel, with the sages, with the rabbis. What did he do? He killed them all. Very simple. like the mafia. He went and killed them all, besides one. Now the thing is that he knew that the power of our nation and the merit of our nation is the Torah. So he had to keep one. If he said, if I'll kill all of them, we're not going to have any Torah, and that will weaken us, and eventually we'll be conquered, and so forth. So he left one sage called Baba ben Buta. But he's such an evil individual, Hordus, that he wanted to make sure he's controlling him, so he took his eyes out. He made him blind. Niker Einav, he poked his eyes out. Okay, time passed, and he wanted to see what this Baba ben Buta, what he says, what he thinks, what's going on. If he was afraid that Baba ben Buta is holding grudge towards him, or that he's makpid on him. He's like very upset with him, and chas v'shalom, that can cause a problem. So he wore like regular clothes, took off his king clothes, wore regular clothes, and he somehow, walked in the street and walked into his home. Well, knock on the door, and he invites him in, and he walks in, he tells him, I'm just a bypasser, maybe have something to drink, and then he starts talking with him. And as he's talking, he's telling him, tell me, Kvod Harav, the rabbi, what do you think of the king of Hordus? So Baba Buta says, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I think. No, come on, what do you think about it? You think he's a good king? You think he's a bad king? He says, I don't see any reason why I need to talk. I don't talk. Yeah, but everybody knows he poked your eyes out. He killed all the rest of the sages. What do you think? He says, it doesn't matter what I think, because I'm committed by the Torah that even if it's an evil individual, we don't talk. He's still the king. We still have to give respect to the king. And I have nothing to say. I don't want to say anything. He doesn't understand. Holdo says, well, the guy is like a bunker, doesn't say anything. And he's trying by here and there to trick him to say something bad about the king. And he tells him, yeah, no, it's just you and me here. Nobody will hear. Just tell me what you really think about him. What did he tell him? Of hashamayim yolichet hakol. The bird that flies in the sky will take my voice to the king and he will hear what I said about him. He didn't say. Hordus was so impressed by this approach by the rabbi, after he poked his eyes out, killed all the rest of the sages, still didn't talk bad about him, and not only that, was so committed, he says the Torah doesn't allow me to talk negative or positive about him. He was so impressed that he came forward and confessed to the rabbi and says, listen, I did a horrible sin. I killed all the chachamim. I killed all the rabbis. We don't have any Torah now in our nation. What did he tell him? I turned off the light of the world. Chibiti oro shel olam. What can I do? Give me something that I can repent. So Baba ben Buta told him, you turned off the light of the world, because the Torah is the light of the world. Then light up the Torah again. How? Well, with Bet HaMikdash. How exactly? I don't know if you remember, that was towards the end of the era of the Second Temple. 400 plus years, things were falling apart already. It wasn't in such great condition. He went and remodeled the entire Bet HaMikdash. Spent millions and millions of, whatever, didn't have dollars then, but nevertheless, spent millions of gold coins. And the Talmud says, if you didn't see the Bet HaMikdash, the bite of what Hordus did, you didn't see the glory of Bet HaMikdash. Apparently, he renovated it to be something outstanding. So that's the story in the Talmud, and that's really the logic behind what the Torah says, that what the severity of Lashon Hara, because the logic of the Torah saying that the words kill. And not only that the words kill, there's no end to the spread of the words. You said the word out, and you don't know where it's going to end. And that's the problem with many people, that they say, oh, I only told it to one person. Yeah, but that person told it to this person and that person, and before you know it, it can be tens of thousands of people. And in our generation, it's easy to understand how tens of thousands of people, all you need to do is write something on social media, and the whole world sees it. Now, that's a little bit of background about what the Torah has to say about Lashon Hara, and a little bit from the Gemara. But the halacha has another approach by saying, first of all, Lashon Hara is broken down into three categories. The first one is Lashon Hara. No other way of saying it. Lashon Hara, and the halacha explains and defines Lashon Hara is when you talk truth. It's not that you're lying. Lying is a lie. Lashon Hara is that I spoke with you about her and it was 100% truth. And that's a Isur D'Oraita. That's a prohibition from the Torah. The next level of Lashon Hara, or the next category, because the halacha breaks it into three categories. The halacha calls it Avak Lashon Hara. Dust of Lashon Hara. Now what does that really mean? If you remember, we learned not too long ago in the series of Lashon Hara, the concept of Avak Lashon Hara, but the Shulchan Aruch titles it in a very short way. That you're hinting that there's Lashon Hara to talk about. What does that mean? You come to me and say, tell me, what did I hear? So-and-so did this and that. Please don't tell me. I don't want to talk Lashon Hara. Oh, so there's something to talk about. That's Avak Lashon Hara. How many times people say, I don't want to talk Lashon Hara. It's Lashon Hara. So you're confessing or you're declaring, there is something to talk about. You should say, I don't know what you're talking about. And how many times people ask me, what do you think of this and that? I don't know the person. I don't want to say, don't put me in a corner that I will be forced to speak Lashon Hara. Because then I'm saying, in other words, there is what to say. I say, I don't know the person. No, never heard. That's it. Finish it over there. So Avak Lashon Hara is that you, and I'm giving you one example out of many. Sometimes somebody can ask you, what do you think of so-and-so? That's enough. You're basically saying, I don't think there's so much great things, but I'm not saying anything. So that's considered Avak Lashon Hara. And like this, we can give you now 500 examples. But the definition of avak means dust. It's not real, the real thing. It's like the dust of Lashon Hara. Shulchan Aruch says, you're hinting that there is actually Lashon Hara to say. And the last one, the last category that Shulchan Aruch explains, it says Lashon Hara is gossiping. And it calls it rechilut. And what is that rechilut? It's information that is not good or not bad. It doesn't help, it doesn't hurt. It can hurt and it can help, but it's like nonsense. Real nonsense. Oh, you saw the car that so-and-so, but who cares that you bought a car? Now, interestingly, the first two are considered D'Oraita. It's a prohibition from the Torah. Rechilut, gossiping, the Shulchan Aruch says, no, that's Isur D'Rabanan. That our sages added that. It's not coming from the Torah. Now, why would the sages add rechilut, gossiping, to the definition of Lashon Hara? So I'll explain to you why our sages added that. There's a story in the book of Shmuel that before Shaul, the king, was about to lose his kingship, then there was a great prophet in the generation, Shmuel, and Shmuel let him know that not only that he's going to lose his leadership, but also his son is not going to become king. Because usually the son becomes the king. Shmuel already told him, forget about you not being king, but your son is also not going to become king. With that, Shaul dedicated his life to run and pursue and to try to prosecute King David, who was not king yet, of course. He was just known as Ben Ishai, the son of Ishai, some peasant. Nobody looked at him as some great leader. But nevertheless, Shaul decided, till the last day I can, I'm going to go after David HaMelech. And there's stories over stories what he did to him. At some point, came some individual who's known as Doeg HaEdomi. And he comes to Shaul and tells him, you're looking for David, right? I know who he is. Oh, really? Where is he? Got some juicy information? Yeah. So they met in a dark alley with a briefcase full of money. That's my addition. So Doeg HaEdomi tells Shaul, I know where you can find David. So he tells him where. So he says he went to Nov. Nov was a city of where the Kohanim used to live. It's called Ir HaKohanim, the city of Kohanim. And he says, not only that he's in the city of Kohanim, he's a guest at the Achimelech Kohen Gadol. What? Shaul HaMelech got so angry, says, the Kohen Gadol, Achimelech, knows that I'm looking for David and he's hosting him. Shaul HaMelech went into Nov, killed Achimelech, Kohen Gadol, and another 80 Kohanim. All the Kohanim that were there, he killed them all. Why? From the anger that they were hiding him there or hosting him, whatever, and David HaMelech was there. So the Shulchan Aruch explains why did our sages add rechilut, gossiping, to the definition of Lashon Hara? Because it's not Doraita, it's the Rabbanan, by saying, doesn't matter, even if you have information, you don't have to say. That's rechilut, that's gossiping. You don't have to say, hold it to yourself. Look at the result. Shaul got upset, went into Nov, killed the Kohen Gadol. Just imagine. And people up until they think, how can it be that in the leadership, in the biblical or the Torah leadership, can't be any corruption? There's dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of stories in Tanakh about corruption in the leadership in the Torah and in our nation. A few months ago when I gave a class, I think it's already even a year ago, even more, when I talked about the vaccines, and I a little bit talked about how can it be that certain rabbis are approving or going against or whatever. And I said, listen, there are a lot of corrupt rabbis. What's the secret to hide here? And half the world went against me. How dare I go against the Rabbanim? I'm not going against any Rabbanim. I'm just giving clear information. And yeah, there are many of them that are crooks. And many of them are Erev Rav. So what if they have a beard? So same thing here. Shaul HaMelech goes and kings a Kohen Gadol. It's unheard of. And then with him another 80 Kohanim. And that is done by a Jewish king. Why? Because he's upset at David HaMelech. Why? Because his son is not going to become king. And Doeg Edomi, this snitch, I know where David is. So our sages say, you don't have to say anything. Keep your mouth shut. Now interestingly, and that's the approach, not the approach, that's the definition of the halakha. Before I was explaining a little bit what the Gemara is talking about. Here we have a clear halakha. Lashon Hara, Avak Lashon Hara, and Rechilut. 3 categories when it comes to Lashon Hara, slandering. But more interesting is that even if you look in the Torah, when I became observant, I had a lot of questions. Why is this like this? Why is this like that? You know, you need good answers. You don't have good answers, you get turned off. And I could not understand how come in the Torah, every time that Hashem talks to Moshe, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe le'emor. Right? And Hashem spoke to Moshe in order for him to say, okay, you said that already, le'emor. Why? Torah doesn't waste words. Why every time le'emor? Le'emor is to give over. The Torah is already trying to hinting to you that every time Hashem told Moshe, unless I tell you to say, don't say anything. Why is the Torah saying le'emor? Le'emor? Because Hashem says, unless I tell you, you can say it, you zip your mouth. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's like hitting the jackpot. Because I couldn't find a good explanation. Why the Torah keeps saying to Hashem told Moshe, whatever commandment, le'emor, to give it over. Genius. Because Hashem says, unless I told you, don't say anything. I told you, say it, go and say it. So we can understand in all different ways how the Torah is very particular about the controlling our mouth, controlling the words that are coming out of our mouth. So, you know, we're talking about a serious and heavy conversations. I'll tell you a little bit of a humorous story. That there's a famous Rebbe, his name is Rabbi Shlomos from Karlin. And there's a story that one time he went on a journey, and it's like today, you fly, or today you take a train. So in those days, there's a horse and buggy, there's people, that was their business, they had a horse and a buggy, and you can load 10, 15 people, and you buy a ticket, and you can go from point A to point B. So he had to go on a journey, and he goes on this horse and buggy. Now he's sitting there, minding his own business, and all the people on the buggy, what are you going to do now? A journey of 15 hours. So they're all talking and gossiping and slandering. And so Rabbi Shlomos from Karlin says, I can't be sitting here. This is Moshav Leitzim. This is not an appropriate place. So what does he do? He turns to the driver And he tells him, tell me, how much does your horse cost? He says, oh, it's 1,000 ruble. Ooh, I have a horse and I'm worth 2,000 ruble. Wow. And they start talking about horses. Because it's almost like now, you go to somebody who has a car, people you talk to them about cars. Ooh, their eyes become bright. So he was talking with them about horses. And the whole way, this horse and that horse and my friend's horse and that horse. And the whole way he's talking with them about horses. Finally, when he gets to the destination, one of the guys turns around and tells him, Rebbe, I didn't know you're so knowledgeable about horses. Where do you have all this knowledge about horses? So he says, really, I'm not so knowledgeable about horses. But when I came up on the buggy and I heard you talking, how you were talking, you were killing people with how you're talking. So I think it's better if you kill horses. So, the point is that any type of talking, specifically lashon hara, slandering, gossiping, the Torah is looking at it in a very severe way. And, up until now we were talking about the severity of lashon hara, but we started the class not with lashon hara or gossip or slandering. We talked about what's called dvarim betilim, talking that has no importance to it. I call it chit-chat, but the biblical term is milim betelot, dvarim betelim. Words is coming out of my mouth that has no importance. Like you meet somebody in the street, what do you think of the game last night? What do you think of the weather? It's nonsense. Get to the point. So now we want to focus on the concept of chit-chat, of dvarim betelim. Now, when you're looking at the concept, because I told you, our sages say it's not really a sin. If I'm now sitting with you in a coffee shop or whatever, and we're just chit-chatting, that's not a sin. I'm not doing anything valuable with my time, but I can't categorize it as our sin. So the teachings of Kabbalah adds a very interesting approach by saying, when the man was created, when Adam HaRishon was created, there's 4 powerful words. Vayipach be'apiv nishmat chaim. Hashem blew in his nostrils a living soul. Okay. Why is that so significant? So if you're reading the Torah, there are different types of translations. The common one is called unkulus. And most of the Chumashim, you open the Chumash, you'll have the commentary of Rashi, even though there are dozens of others, and there's the translation of Unkulus, even though there's a few others. How does Unkulus translate Vayipach be'apav nishmat chaim? He calls it Ruach memalela, a spirit that talks. That's how he translates it. Saying, in other words, that the main power or the main energy, I would say maybe power, the Kabbalah calls it a koach hamerkazi, the main power that the human has is speech. If the Torah says that vayipach be'apiv nishmat chaim, and the translation says a talking spirit, saying in other words, what is our most powerful power is speech. And really, when you're thinking about it, that's what separates us from any type of creature. That we can talk. And we can put letters together. And we can put words together. So this is the Kabbalistic approach to the power that we have. Is showing to us and teaching to us what's the real problem with that chit-chat. Because if you're saying Lashon Hara, that we defined already. We're done with Lashon Hara. That's bad. It's against the Torah. The Torah prohibits you to slander, to gossip and so forth. Here we're talking about chit-chat. The Kabbalistic approach is that speech, talking, is a power that takes over. That it can take over the person itself that is talking about it. And that's the problem with chit-chat, that it takes over you. Whatever you talk, whatever you chit-chat, eventually it becomes part of your thought. If me and you are talking about something, then I'll think about it. And how many times you talk about something with somebody and later on you're like, I should have said this, I should have said that, why didn't I say this? But more than that, if you have a conversation, whatever, no topic or no importance, it takes over you, becomes part of you. You're thinking about it. That's the talk of the day. And people are talking. And The teachings of Kabbalah explains that the power of speech takes over a person. That's why I told you before that the Hasidic approach is don't call it death and life, rather call it quality of life. Why? Because when you want good quality of life, then you have to guard what you're actually saying. Because at the end of the day, whatever you say will take over you. And it will take control over you. And that's where you see the hint in the Torah, the order of how the tzarat, the lesion, the leprosy comes. Because what does the Torah says? First of all, it comes on the house, right? Then it comes on the clothes, and then it comes on the person. So what is the significance here? What is the hint here? That when it comes on the house, it's the outer part. It's nothing to do with me. I live in it, it belongs to me, but it's not on me. It's external. The Torah calls it shulaim, like the, how do you call it when you drive on a highway, you have the side of the road, not the maiden between the lanes, but now? Shoulder. So the Torah calls it, that's the shoulder. The house is like outside. But the garment is on you. That's already, the tzarat is on you. And the last is the guf, part of you. So it starts around you. Then it becomes on you, and worst of all, becomes part of you. And that teaches us about the severity. Now, interestingly, when we're focusing on this chit-chat, this Dvarim Betelim, then there's a few great points that our sages bring up. One of them is in the book of Tanya. He explains something very interesting. He says that, Balatanya says that talking is a levush, is a garment. If you learn the book of Tanya, in the beginning he explains that we have, our soul has three garments: thought, speech, and action. Basically saying that speech is a garment to the soul. Now what does that mean? That a garment I can take off. I can put on. Saying in other words that I can control what I'm talking. If the talking is a garment, then I have full control over it. I can decide what I'm wearing and when I'm taking it off and what's going to happen with it. And if this is the case, then I have full control over my speech. Most people can control what they're saying, but in a correct way, in a correct world, I have control over the speech. Another interesting approach from the same generation is by Rabbi Nachman from Breslev, who says something genius. He says, usually it's kids that learn how to talk, and many years later it's the adults that learn how to shut up. And he says it should be the other way around. First you need to teach the person how to shut up, and then you can teach him how to and when to talk. And that's really one of the problems of looking at it, because most people, they know how to talk, but they don't know how to close their mouth, and it should be the other way around. So, and again, we're constantly talking about all this sicha betela, conversation that leads to nowhere. On that, our sages explain in the Talmud, in Tractate Brachot, that we have a commandment. We say Kriyat Shema every day. And in Kriyat Shema it says, V'dibarta bam. And talking about words of Torah. So our sages says, what is bam? Bam is with them or in them. You should speak with them. So our sages says, what do you mean bam? What is this word bam? Our sages explain the words that you have permission to speak with. So what is the words that I have permission to speak with? Torah. Because it says, V'dibarta bam, it's talking about Torah. So our sages teach us, these are the words that I have permission to speak. You can speak with no limit, but that's Torah. Anything else, who says you have permission to speak? I didn't give you any permission to speak. Exactly going back to with Moshe Rabbeinu. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe le'emor. Hashem says, I'm giving you permission what to say and what not to say. So here the Talmud says, V'dibarta bam, which is part of the verse in Kriyat Shema, in the first parasha, that our sage says, bam, goes and what the Torah permitted you to say. But anything else, who says you have permission to say? So I told you, not once and not twice, I always quote the same Mishnah of Rabbi Shimon, who says on himself that Kol Chayai Gadalti Ben HaChachamim, all my life I was raised, I was grown around all the sages. Specifically, Rabbi Shimon grew in the house of Rabban Shimon Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel, sorry, he was the head of the Sanhedrin. Just imagine you live in the house of the head of the Sanhedrin. What influence you get. And he says, all my life I grew around the Chachamim. V'lo matzati laguf tov mishtika. And I didn't find anything good for the body but silence. And I quote this Mishnah over and over and over. The best thing is silence. And you know why? Because many things that you do in life, you're going to regret them. Some of them you already regret, some things you do, and you know, as you're doing it, I'm going to regret that. One thing that you cannot regret is silence. What are you going to regret? You didn't say anything. And if you didn't say something in the right time, then you always have the option of saying. So you're never going to regret silence, because what harm will the silence do? Now I know some will say, listen, but sometimes you need to say. Well, sure, okay, I understand. It's true. There's a time to open your mouth. But if you didn't, there's nothing to regret, because you can open it whenever you want. You know, in a week, Be'ezrat Hashem, hard to believe, we're going to be celebrating Pesach. I know we didn't have much classes about it, but in the last month I'm going through a lot of material. It's very, I have a very interesting commentary. I thought of maybe teaching from it, maybe if we have time, the commentary of the Zera Shimshon on the Haggadah. So very interesting. It's a whole Haggadah, and he has his commentary on every part. Very, very wise. Now, the Haggadah is not some story. It was written by Rabbi Alon Anava. And in the Haggadah, it says something, if you remember, there are 4 kids, right? The Chacham, the Tam, She'eno יודע Lishol, the Rasha, the wicked one, the smart one, the one who doesn't know how to ask. But look what it says about the smart one. Ha-Chacham, Ma'u Omer. That's what it says. The wise one, what does he say? Read it the other way around, you can understand it by, you want to know if the person is wise? Listen to what he says. Unbelievable genius. You want to know if the person is smart or not? Just listen to what he says. Stupid people talk nonsense. Wise people don't talk much, and what they say is wise. And in the Haggadah, I saw that the other day, I was like, this is amazing. V'achacham ma omer. Read it opposite. You want to know who's wise? Listen to what they say. So with that said, we talked about a pretty heavy concept. Most people don't like hearing how bad they are and that they speak bad, and we all fail with Lashon Hara. So at least we can finish with something positive and take some positive note and some, not only inspiration, but something to apply from this parasha. Because the parasha, to be honest, you read the parasha, it's depressing. All it's talking about is lesions and tzarat, and you can get depressed from the parasha. So I'll tell you a quick story that I find it one of the most powerful stories in the Talmud, that there was a great sage. It's talking about Rabban Gamliel, who, like I told you, was the Rosh of the Sanhedrin, the head of the great assembly. And he had a worker, a slave, or whatever you want to call it, an assistant. But this individual wasn't a Jew. His name was Tabi. Some say Tabi, but his name was Tabi. Okay? I told you a few times stories about Tabi. There's a story that one time Rabban Gamliel tells him, Tabi, I'm not such in a good mood today. I don't know. Maybe you can go to the market and get me something bitter. Something not so good. I don't know, I'm not in a good mood. Okay. Tabi goes to the market, comes back, and he brings him a tongue of a cow. Okay. A week later, Rabban Gamliel tells him, you know what, Tabi, today I'm in a great mood. Why don't you go to the market and bring something sweet? So he goes to the market, comes back also with a tongue of a cow. So Rabban Gamliel tells him, what are you bringing me both the times you brought me a tongue of the cow? So Tabi tells him words of wisdom by saying, Mimena hatov, mimena hara. From this tongue comes good, and from this tongue comes bad. When it's good, there's nothing sweeter than that. When it's bad, there's nothing worse than that. Very wise words from Tabi. So like I told you, when you're reading the parasha, you can fall chas v'shalom to sadness and depression. Why are they talking to me all this lashon hara all the time and all this bad? And what you can take from this parasha is what Tabi tells you. When the tongue is used bad, there's nothing worse than that. Insulting, humiliating, words can kill, words can chas v'shalom destroy an individual. But when the words are positive words, words of comfort and words of inspiration and words of just gratitude or whatever, there's nothing sweeter than that. You can take the speech to any direction you want. So you need to choose to take it knowing the severity of the negative, then take it to a positive. Why choose? Like I told you before, when I said that Shlomo Melech says, Chaim v'amavet biyad halashon, the life and death is in the hand of the tongue, I understand when the hand represents, you have the option. You can take it or leave it. You can push, you can pull. You have the choice. You have the choice if to use it good or to use it bad. You know, even Rashi, if you're looking, Rashi says also about this whole tzarat, that midavar ra yotze davar tov, mashu tov. Rashi says, from something bad can always come something good. How does Rashi explain himself? He says when the nation of Israel went into the land of Canaan, and when they spoke lashon hara, they had to demolish the walls. Now what happened there? I'm sure you read the Rashi that says, then they found treasures in the walls. Because when they came to conquer the land of Israel, then there were many different nations settling the land. And one of the nations is called Amoraim. And they saw the Israelites coming, so they said, okay, they'll conquer us. Let's hide all of our treasures in the wall. One day we'll kick them out of their houses, or we'll reconquer the land, and we'll take all the treasures out of the walls. And what does Rashi says? They came, spoke lashon hara, there was tzarat on the walls, they broke the walls. What do you know? Treasures in the walls, gold, diamonds, rubies, and so forth. So Rashi says, see, midavar ra yotze mashu tov, from something bad comes something good. Comes a big question now. Why does Rashi choose to say that the Amoraim ba'aretz, Amoraim is Amorites, but this is the land of Canaan, of Canaan. So why is Rashi choosing to say the Amorites when there are other nations there? So Rashi, the explanation of Rashi is that yes, there are many nations in Israel, but the Amorites, how do you say them in Hebrew? Amoraim. Amoraim is the same root of the Hebrew word le'emor, to say. Saying that the Amorites represent the power of speaking. That the power of speaking can hide in it treasures. The way the commentary says, koach ha'amira yesh bo matmonot zahav. The power of talking, of speaking, hidden in it, gems. Matmonot zahav is like rubies, gems, or all sorts of, when you dig in the ground, you find matmon is like a treasure. Saying in other words that in the power of speech is kochot gdolim, very powerful koach. So when you want to look at the parasha, what you can take from that? Yes, you can have the approach by saying, I don't want to speak lashon hara. Good, if that's your conclusion, great. But we have to also understand that in the power of speaking can be hidden great treasures. I can tell now my child one word which is negative and ruin his day, and I can tell my child one word of encouragement and make his day, or his entire life, and so much more so to any person. So in the power of speech is hidden a lot of treasures, a lot of powers. And that's really what one wants to take from this parasha. Yes, you can look at the negative approach, and then it will keep you negative and in a negative way, and looking at it in a way that chas v'shalom can cause you sadness, depression, but you can look at it, well, how powerful my words are. Now take that to what I started saying in the beginning. How many times a day, a week, a month, you either speaking nonsense or you're not speaking at all. How many times? You're just sitting in the bus. Now today what people do is they put music and they, just pull out a book of Tehillim and read Tehillim. You're waiting in line, take a book of Tehillim and bring the Tikkun HaGadol. You have so much more to read. If you just fill these small times, these small pockets, with just reading, like the rabbi that I told you did the siyum, made the siyum of the entire Shas. Why? With these moments, these dead moments, that you're just sitting and doing nothing. You just need to start getting yourself used to that you have a free moment. You don't just stand, right away you pull something out of your pocket and you read. And if you take on yourself to say, you know what, I'm going to try to read a book of Tehillim every month from these moments, you see how much you can do. Or you're saying, I want to read a whole tractate or a certain book. And today, everything has these little booklets. What we need to summarize from that is taking that there's so many moments in our day that are filled with nothing. You have to turn it around and fill it with something positive. That every free moment that you have, then you do something positive, especially with the power of speech, reading, reciting, memorizing, and so forth. And needless to say that exactly what Rashi says, that in the power, koach ha'amira, yesh matmoniyot zahav, that in the power of speaking, you find treasures and gems of gold with everything that you say. You just need to find the right things to say at the right time, and at the right moment, you'll see how the benefit from all your little talking, positive, and exactly like we says, v'dibart bam, whatever Hashem allows you to talk, which is divrei Torah, then utilize it, and one day you'll find and you'll see in the world to come all these treasures of gold of all these little words that you were saying.